All right, y'all, welcome to part 6 of this eugenics series. Welcome back, and this is part 6, and then there'll probably be a part 7, and then that'll be it. Part 7 will be the final one if I can't finish it with this one, okay? So, we're going to finish this series in part 7. Let's get this going. This is the Tuskegee experiment, all right? So this was a monumental case that lasted for decades. And the only reason it stopped is because they got busted. If they wouldn't have got busted, they would have kept doing this, right? They were intentionally giving black folks so-called syphilis. And they were controlling the experiment and intentionally not giving them the penicillin and things of that nature. Okay? It's called the Tuskegee experiment. As you can see in this picture. Which makes me cringe when I see this picture. Now, here's an article from the New York Times, briefly talking about it. This was so egregious and so ridiculous and so over-the-top racist and, for lack of a better word, evil, that they even had to admit it. It was that evil that they had to admit the shit. Now, this is from a Harvard published paper on the Tuskegee experiment. There's a million different sources I could have used for this, all right? There's all types of sources for this. Excuse me. All right, let's go in. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service initiated an experiment in Macon County, Alabama, to determine the natural course of untreated latent syphilis in black males. The test comprised 400 syphilitic men as well as 200 uninfected men who served as controls. The first published report of the study appeared in 1936, with subsequent papers issued every 4 to 6 years through the 1960s. When penicillin became widely available in the early 50s as the preferred treatment for syphilis, the men did not receive therapy. In fact, on several occasions, the USPHS actually sought to prevent treatment. Moreover, a committee at the federally operated Center for Disease Control decided in 1969 that the study should be continued. You see, there goes the CDC continuing the shit, even though they knew. All right? Only in 1972, when the accounts of the study first appeared in national press, did the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare halt the experiment. See, once the public started figuring out. Excuse me. At that time, 74 of the test subjects were still alive. At least 28, but perhaps more than 100 had died directly from the advanced syphilitic lesions. In August 1972, Hugh appointed an investigatory panel which issued a report the following year. The panel found the study to have been ethically unjustified and argued that penicillin should have been provided to the men. This article attempts to place the Tuskegee study in a historical context and assess its ethical implications. Despite the media attention which the study received, the Hugh final report and the criticism expressed by several professional organizations, the experiment had been largely misunderstood. The most basic questions of how the study was undertaken in the first place, and why it continued for 40 years was never addressed by the Hugh investigation. Moreover, the panel misconstrued the nature of the experiment, failing to consult important documents available at the National Archives, which bear significantly on its ethical assessment. Only by examining the specific ways in which values are engaged in scientific research can the study be understood. So they're implying that the study wasn't good enough, or possibly even tainted, all right? So, a brief review of the prevailing scientific thought regarding race and heredity in the early 20th century is fundamental for understanding the Tuskegee study. By the turn of the century, Darwinism had provided a new rationale for American racism. All right? You hear that? Darwinism had provided a new rationale for American racism. So the reason why I'm putting this experiment in my eugenics presentation, because it's inherently important to the eugenics conversation. And ironically, reading through this report, they're saying the same thing. That by the turn of the century, Darwinism had providing a new rationale for American racism. You see? That pseudoscience nonsense that Darwin was setting up with evolution was the justification for not only this, but many other catastrophes, okay? That was outright terrorization, okay? In one case, you had the oral polio vaccine, which they took over to the Congo and proceeded to give 1 million blacks AIDS and cancer. And then later, so, oh, oops, we had AIDS and cancer in it. No oops. You don't accidentally give 1 million people shit like this. You see, vaccines have everything to do with eugenics. Don't let them stick you in your arm with anything. These people are not to be trusted. And for that matter, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your race is. These people have a known background for using needles as mass poisoning campaigns. They cannot be trusted. Look at this man's belt above his fucking belly button, by the way. What the fuck? That's unimportant. Let's keep going. Germ warfare declared against blacks. Hundreds of black men discovered massacred in syphilis experiment. All right? This shit ain't a secret, y'all. This shit was so blatant that it just can't be covered up. All right? Going back to Darwin setting the standard for this shit and giving people a justification. Essentially, primitive peoples, it was argued, could not be assimilated into a complex white civilization. Okay? I'm going to say that again. Essentially, primitive peoples, it was argued, could not be assimilated into a complex white civilization. Scientists speculated that in the struggle for survival, the Negro in America was doomed, particularly prone to disease, vice, and crime. Black Americans could not be helped by education or philanthropy. Now, I gotta stop for a second, because this is like triggering for me. This really aggravates me right here. Now, to say, for one, you've got Caucasians and Nordics who are severely aggressive and criminal for so long. They got no room to talk, throwing rocks from that glass house. Like my people, for example, I got some Scandinavian blood. It's called Scandinavia because it's scandalous, vicious. This shit is fucking bullshit right here. It's bullshit, and you know it's bullshit. And then the other part of it is the Negro in America is doomed because of disease, vice, and crime. You mean to tell me that the white skin races don't have vices and are addicted to alcohol and drugs just as easy? Really? Not only that, you're not mentioning the fact that when the white races intermixed with Neanderthals in the caves and we brought disease and famine everywhere we went. Are you fucking kidding me? Damn, y'all. Sorry, I just had to do that real quick. Because, man, I'm tired of this shit, y'all. I'm tired of the bullshit. We're telling the truth today. Like I said, we're going to identify this shit. Then we can unravel it, and then we can move on. But until then, come on now. Let's be real. Now, the Negro in America was doomed, particularly prone to disease, vice, and crime. Black Americans could not be helped by education or philanthropy. God, again, they weren't even allowed access to education. But oh, I gotta stop. I'm gonna keep going now. Social Darwinists analyzed census data to predict the virtual extinction of the Negro in the 20th century. For they believed the Negro race in America was in the throes of degenerative evolutionary process. The medical profession supported these findings of late 19th and early 20th century anthropologists, ethnologists, and biologists. Physicians studying the effects of emancipation on health concluded that almost universally that freedom had caused the mental, moral, and physical deterioration of the black population. Oh my God. Shit, this is fucking bullshit. It's hard to even get through this. They substantiated this argument by citing examples of the comparative anatomy in the black and white races. As Dr. W.T. English wrote, a careful inspection reveals the body of a Negro, a mass of minor defects and imperfections from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet. Don't tell me this shit ain't racist. God damn. Cranial structures, wide nasal apertures, receding chins, projecting jaws, all typed the Negro as the lowest species in the Darwinian hierarchy. You see? This is very important for you to understand the pseudoscience and bullshit of Darwin, because it laid the foundation for this. Even outside of this Harvard paper that was published, I believe I've still proved that. All right? Interest in racial differences centered on the sexual nature of blacks. The Negro, doctors explained, possessed an excessive sexual desire which threatened the very foundations of white society. Whew. As one physician noted in the Journal of American Medical Association, the Negro springs from a southern race, and as his sexual appetite is strong, all of his environments stimulate this appetite, and as a general rule, his emotional type of religion certainly does not decrease it. Doctors reported a complete lack of morality on part of the blacks. This is a quote right here. Virtue in the Negro race is like angels' visits, few and far between. In a practice of 16 years, I've never examined a virgin Negro over 14 years of age. Again, they're not taking into account a bazillion things. You rip these people away and strip them of their culture. You don't even let them read books. Now you're pointing at them talking about how they're ignorant and shit. Get the fuck out of here. All right? A particularly ominous feature of this overzealous sexuality, doctors argued, was the black male's desire for white women. A perversion from which most races are exempt, wrote Dr. English, prompts the Negro's inclination towards white women, whereas other races incline towards females of their own. Though English estimated the gray matter of the Negro brain to be at least 1,000 years behind that of the white races, his genital organs were overdeveloped, as Dr. William Lee Howard noted. The attacks, you see any projection here? The attacks on defenseless white women are evidences of the racial instincts that are about as amenable to the ethnic culture as inherent odor of the race. As the inherent odor of the race. When education, okay, here goes somebody getting shot up. Jesus. Okay. When education will reduce the size of the Negro's penis as well as bring about the sensitiveness of the terminal fibers which exist in the Caucasian, then will it also be able to prevent the African's birthright, the sexual madness and excess. One Southern medical journal proposed castration instead of lynching. And believe me, they did both in many cases. As retribution for black sexual crimes. An impressive trial by listen to this, y'all. This is sinister. An impressive trial by a ghost-like Ku Klux Klan and a ghost physician or surgeon to perform the operation would make it an event the patient would never forget, noted the editorial. Basically saying having someone dressed in a hood doing the procedure to make it horrifying and traumatic. Jesus Christ. I'm sick of this shit, y'all. I'm sick of this racist bullshit, man. We're telling the truth today. According to these physicians, lust and immorality, unstable families, and a reversion to barbaric tendencies made blacks especially prone to venereal diseases. One doctor estimated that over 50% of all Negroes over the age of 25 were syphilitic. Virtually free of disease as slaves, they were now overwhelmed by it. According to informed medical opinion, moreover, doctors believed that treatment for venereal diseases among the blacks was impossible. Particularly because in its latent stage, the symptoms of syphilis become quiescent, as Dr. Thomas Murrell wrote. They come for treatment at the beginning and at the end, when there are visible manifestations, or when harried by pain they readily come, for as a race they are not adverse to physic. But tell them not, though they look well and feet well, they are still diseased. Here ignorance rates science a fool. They weren't allowed to even read, so get the fuck out of here with that shit. Even the best educated black, according to Murrell, could not be convinced to seek treatment for syphilis. Venereal disease, according to some doctors, threatened the future of the race. The medical profession attributed the low birth rate among blacks to the high prevalence of venereal disease, which caused stillbirths and miscarriages. Moreover, the high rates of syphilis were thought to lead to increased insanity and crime. One doctor, writing at the turn of the century, estimated that the number of insane Negroes had increased 13-fold since the end of the Civil War. Dr. Murrell's conclusion echoed the most informed anthropological and ethnological data. He says, so the scourge sweeps among them. Those that are treated are only half cured, in the effort to assimilate a complex civilization driving their diseased minds until the results are criminal records. Perhaps here, in conjunction with tuberculosis, will be the end of the Negro problem. Disease will accomplish what men cannot do. You see, that's the truth about this Tuskegee bullshit. They were trying to figure out how to wipe these people out. The fuck out of here with any of that other bullshit. This particular configuration of ideas formed the core of medical opinion concerning blacks, sex, and disease in the early 20th century. Doctors generally discounted socioeconomic explanations of the state of black health, arguing that better medical care could not alter the evolutionary scheme. These assumptions provide the backup for explaining the Tuskegee syphilis study. Tell me that ain't no damn bullshit, y'all. Tell me that ain't no damn bullshit. Look, I'm back to my cussing again, but man, it's for a valid reason, y'all. We need more than cuss words. This is some real bullshit. And look, y'all marching in line to inject your children with these needles. And when I say y'all, I'm not referencing a certain race. I mean y'all who are pro-vax. Y'all who are pro-vax got the nerve to not only get us to go poison us, our children and ourselves, you want to have the state mandate it. You fucking psychopaths, get the hell out of here. So that stuff like this can happen whenever they want to. That's a fact, y'all. It's a fact that if they want to, they can do something like this if we have mandatory vaccines. It's a fact. It's not a fact that they're going to, but it's a fact that they can. It's a fact. Not only is it a fact that they can, it's a fact that they have already done it. I'm showing you right now. This eugenics presentation would take me 500 days if I put all the sufficient information into it. So I'm not going to do that. If for some insane reason you're pro-vax, that likely means you haven't done the research. And this isn't going to turn into a vaccine presentation because there are so many presentations done by so many people who are so much smarter than me and have so much more access to the actual medical records and documents that it would be pointless for me to do it. It would be pointless for me to design a vaccine expose. There's an unlimited amount of them that are more than enough work to prove that vaccines are outright part of the eugenics agenda and outright designed to poison people. All right? Now I'm going to finish this. This is the end. I'm going to finish this. All right? We're talking about the Tuskegee still. Possibilities for mass treatment. The USPS found Macon County, Alabama, in which the town of Tuskegee is located, to have the highest syphilis rate of the 6 counties surveyed. The Rosenwald study concluded that the mass treatment could be successfully implemented among rural blacks, although it is doubtful that the necessary funds would have been allocated even in the best economic conditions after the economy had collapsed in 1929, which is oh man, that's another story. Fed Reserve. The findings were ignored. It is, however, which I spent 20 minutes completely exposing in my LGBT agenda video. Go check that out. I spent 20 minutes exposing how finance works in America, and then I jump back over to Germany. Now, moving on. It is, however, ironic that the Tuskegee study came to be based on the findings of the Rosenwald study that demonstrated the possibilities of mass treatment. 3 years later, in 1932, Dr. Talia Farrell Clark, chief of the USPHS Venereal Disease Division, and author of the Rosenwald study report, decided that the conditions in Macon County merited renewed attention. Clark believed that the highest prevalence of syphilis offered an unusual opportunity for observation. From its inception, the USPHS regarded the Tuskegee study as a classic study in nature rather than an experiment. As long as syphilis was so prevalent in Macon, or however you pronounce it, and most of the blacks went untreated throughout life, it seemed only natural to Clark that it would be valuable to observe the consequences. He described it as a ready-made situation. Surgeon General H.S. Cumming wrote to R.R. Moten, director of the Tuskegee Institute, right? The recent syphilis control demonstration carried out in Macon County with the financial assistance of Julian Rosenwald Fund revealed the presence of unusually high rate in this county. What is more high rate in the presence of the unusually high rate in this county, and what is more remarkable, the fact that 99% of this group was entirely without previous treatment. This combination, together with expected cooperation of your hospital, offers an unparalleled opportunity for carrying on this piece of scientific research, which probably cannot be duplicated anywhere else in the world. But believe me, they did duplicate it in other places of the world. This is just Alabama right here. This is just one situation showing how we should run when they try to prick you with them vaccines. Although no formal protocol appears to have been written, several letters of Clark and Cumming suggest that the USPHS hoped to find. What the USPHS hoped to find? Clark indicated that it would be important to see how disease affected the daily lives of the men. The results of the studies and case records suggest the desirability of making a further study of the effect of untreated syphilis on the human economy among people now living engaged in their daily pursuits. Funny how they always do these experiments on black folks. Same thing they did when they tested out the pill, tested out Planned Parenthood, every fucking thing else. Moving on. It also seems that the USPHS believed that the experiment might demonstrate that the anti-syphilitic treatment was unnecessary. As Cumming noted, it is expected that the results of this study may have marked bearing on the treatment, or conversely, the non-necessity of treatment of cases in latent syphilis. The immediate source of Cumming's hypothesis appears to have been the famous Oslo study of untreated syphilis. Between 1890 and 1910, Professor C. Boak, all right? I'm not going to keep going on this, but this picture right here, right? Years later, they finally released a formal apology to the men of the Tuskegee experiment, right? Now, this is the last man alive. They barely made it in time to apologize to these people. Finally, after all these, it took them all these years to apologize, right? Now, this picture's worth 1,000 words. Look at Bill Clinton's face. Look at this man's face with his hands up. This picture is self-explanatory. I'm not even going to explain it. Bullshit. All right? Now, what are they getting ready to apologize as 50 years from now about what they're doing to us right now in 2019? See, you guys are trusting the wrong people. You got a mother or a father who has a new child that studies till their eyes are bleeding to understand what's going on with vaccines. And you silly ass people want to put pictures up of your doctor talking about, oh, your Google search is better than my degree? You're goddamn right it is. Are you kidding me? Research is research. Research is research. You guys are trusting CBS and CNN to tell you that you should go get vaccines. You're listening to the state, an organized bureaucracy that does not have the citizens' best interest at heart. You're trusting the wrong people. I will trust some random mother who studies to protect her child over a bureaucratic doctor any day. Any day. So I had to say that, man. Because there's a lot of mothers particularly, it happens to fathers too, but mothers particularly right now are being demonized and treated like shit just for doing research to know that they should not be poisoning their child. The only thing worse than poisoning your child is demonizing the people who don't want to poison their children. What the fuck is wrong with y'all? I don't do a lot of vaccine stuff on my eugenics thing because, like I said, there's so much proof. Okay? Now that I'm done with that, we're going to move in on this Aldous Huxley. All right? With his Brave New World. Okay? Nobody's exempt today. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put into this. There's many things that could have put in that didn't get in. But there's a lot of stuff that isn't escaping as well. All right? So, here we go. Huxley was deeply interested in eugenic politics. In the novel, okay, for those of you who don't know, this is this utopian novel he released called Brave New World. I don't know if you've read it or not. I've read it myself. Okay? This is one of the more famous books. Excuse me. Huxley was deeply interested in eugenic politics. In the novel, as well as in other essays published in the late 1920s and early 30s, he defended eugenic policies of encouraging reproduction at the intellectual classes and sterilizing the unfit. Okay? The novel, set in future London around AD 2540, describes a fictional society where children are mass-produced and sorted into castes and ruled by a totalitarian regime. This is part of the Superman, by the way, and refining human beings into one race, one perfect race, refining the world into one perfect new world order as well. Totalitarian regime. All right? A note on eugenics in which Huxley argues that, quote, if, as would be the case in a perfectly eugenicized state, every individual is capable of playing the superior part, who will consent or be content to do the dirty work and obey? The Inhabitants of Mr. Wells' numerous utopias solve the problem by ruling and being ruled. An admirable state of affairs, if it could be arranged. States function as smoothly as they do because the greater part of the population is not very intelligent, dreads responsibility, and desires nothing better than to be told what to do. Damn. Now, this is where I have difficulty. I'm going to be totally honest. I've got to be totally honest. Although I'm a person who philosophically is against the refinement of humans by just arbitrarily deciding what perfection is, all right? Have you ever driven in traffic and seen how disrespectful and rude and ignorant and, for lack of a better word, low IQ many people are? It starts to make you question why you're fighting against these people. Now, I know that sounds harsh, and oh, he's a hypocrite. It's not hypocrite. There is something to be discussed about the masses of ignorant people. So, I don't know if you noticed this, but what he's basically saying is they want to create a race of perfect people, but once they do that, who's going to run all the machines and change out the fucking porta potties and work the fields and pick tomatoes and cotton and every fucking thing else? If we're a whole race of perfect people, who's gonna stoop down to that level? So what he's insinuating here is we've got to find a way to keep the stupid people around but controlled so that they can run the goddamn machines. That's what he's saying here. This is a sentiment that is displayed throughout all types of elites, by the way. This is that poor elites. Like, if it's presented as if a person like myself, for example, coming from the background I come from, somehow breaks through into the elites, then I'm suddenly going to see the problems that they deal with. These are the problems that we deal with. A bunch of idiots and it's supposedly justification for what they're doing. I don't see it. What I see men who are giving in to their lower nature and trying to do something that's not possible. They're trying to create a new world order that is completely totalitarian, completely locked down. But once they think they've done that, something's going to happen to flip it on them. This isn't going to work. It's not going to work. You got to come out of the shadows. The shit's not going to work. This is alarming. He's putting it out there that we've got to keep stupid people around to run the damn machines. Which is what you're going to see in the 1927 film of Metropolis with the workers. And you got people like Madonna coming out doing Metropolis rituals with her worker bees. Because you got to have the dumb workers down below running all the machines, and then you got the nice white people, the nice smart white people on the top enjoying life. This is the goal. We're keeping it real today. Now, Paramount Pictures releases the film The Island of Lost Souls based on H.G. Wells' novel The Island of Dr. Moreau. Centers around a scientist who has built a lab on a remote island while trying to create the perfect human. Experimentation producing a population of half-man, half-beast creatures and demonstrating the folly of playing with nature. Paramount Pictures invited eugenicist Julian Huxley to visit the set while filming in order to verify the accuracy of the film's science. See, Julian Huxley has everything to do with this eugenics movement. So when I say that H.G. Wells in this movie, Island of Lost Souls, has everything to do with eugenics, I'm showing you why. The eugenic use of genetic engineering in support of creating a perfect human made the movie distinct from others at the time, especially as the double helix had yet to be discovered, which would so conveniently back this eugenics movement. October 1932, Emily Murphy, prominent Canadian feminist, suffragist, and member of the famous Five, publishes her article, Overpopulation and Birth Control, in the Vancouver Sun. Again, I'm showing you how feminism ties into the eugenics movement. See at the bottom left, the famous Five feminists that started the movement? They were all eugenicists. And I already exposed that. I think it's like video 2. All right? Same as the CCF, which would be the start of the Democratic Party, I exposed as being eugenicists. So it's no shock at all that the Democratic Party still promotes eugenics. Now, Murphy held that race suicide happened when the poor and mentally, socially inferior reproduced at a much faster rate than what she deemed human thoroughbreds. Excuse me. Murphy promoted the practice of eugenics both in terms of selective breeding and active sterilization of these inferior members of society. Right? 33. British Columbia passes their Sex Act. The legislation outlines that only those individuals who are patients or in custody of an institution defined by either the Mental Hospitals Act, Industrial Home for the Girls, or the Industrial Schools Act could be affected by the act or be sterilized. So these Native Americans, they're ripping out of families' arms and sticking in these schools to anglicize them or to whitenize them, are subject to this. If the superintendent believed that the individual's release for reasons of inheritance would result in the individual having a child with a serious mental disease or mental deficiency, then the superintendent could write a recommendation to the Board of Eugenics. This board, which consisted of a judge, psychiatrist, and social worker, appointed by the lieutenant governor of the province, would then review the case. If after examination the board concurred with the superintendent's evaluation, then sterilization could take place. All right? Giving the state this damn discretion again. Now this is where it starts to get funky, y'all, because again, you're gonna get on these presentations I'm giving you stuff that you're never gonna get at school. It's just never gonna happen. All right? They're never gonna teach you this in school. So, the German Reich government passes the Law for Prevention of Offspring with Hereditary Diseases. The purpose of this legislation is the forced sterilization of those deemed to have a hereditary disease. The legislation outlines candidate subjects for sterilization, the application process, and who was responsible for carrying out the sterilizations. Sterilizations could take place if, in the opinion of a medical expert, there was a high probability of an individual having a child with a serious physical or mental defect of a hereditary nature. Okay? Now, 1933, this is right when Hitler came to power, all right? And as you can see, if you've been going through this whole series with me since part 1, you'll see that this was a long history before this. Long history before this. They really liked it. They really liked what the Americans were doing with their people. And they decided to do it with their people. You see the terminology? Offspring with hereditary diseases? Did I not show you unlimited cases of legislature in America like that? Did I not? Okay, that's actually from a Byzantine Empire, that logo. But that logo is the logo that Hitler used, the double-headed eagle, the duality. Okay, you see the swastika, of course. Now, in terms of process, candidates requesting or recommending for sterilization were processed by a higher hereditary court, just like in America, in Canada, which consisted of a judge, state physician, and a state-appointed physician trained in eugenics. included going against an individual's will. The legislation includes an appeals process for sterilization. At least there was an appeals process. You know that it was damn near impossible, though. An individual wishing to protest their sterilization could petition the hereditary court for a review. It has been suggested that beyond those listed in the legislation, Jewish people and the Gypsies were targeted by this legislation. See, it's been suggested. Okay, let's see the evidence. There's a scholarly debate over the similarities and differences between Nazi sterilization and North America programs. I believe I've shown you clearly that it's extremely similar. This legislation bears notable similarities to the standard legislation in the United States and Canada of the time. There is little that distinguishes it from other sterilization material. You see? Same shit, y'all. Same shit. It was all good when eugenics was exterminating all the dark races. But what happened was when Hitler lumped in the Khazars into it, they had a major problem with that, as you could see. I mean, as you would believe. Dr. Helen McMurphy publishes a short book entitled Sterilization, Birth Control, a book for family welfare and safety, sterilization and legislation, overwhelmingly positive review by the Canadian Medical Association Journal. McMurphy was a medical doctor and an advocate of sterilization. You see? Doctors in the state. I've relentlessly proved that the state and the doctors are pushing this eugenics. 35. South Carolina was the 31st and second to last state to implement a sterilization law. The bill was first drafted in 31. So this is interesting, you guys. So listen to this. The Deep South also lacked the scientific and educational resources that made the idea of eugenics go over smoothly in other parts of the country. You see, not only is this admitting that they used all that pseudoscience bullshit that I've shown you to make it go over smoothly, people in the South didn't believe in all that scientific bullshit. Their instincts were correct. All right? Now look. Several groups other than the mentally ill were targeted by South Carolina's legislation, including women and African Americans. Of the 277 sterilizations performed in the state, 255 were on women, and African Americans represented 102 of those 277. So what happened to feminism? What happened to feminism, huh? I don't think they really care about protecting women. I think they care about promoting their eugenic agenda. And I think I'm showing you that. The Nuremberg race laws. The law for the protection of the German blood and German honor. And the Reich citizenship law. The former law made a sharp distinction between Germans and Jews, forbidding intermarriage and sexual relations between members of these groups. The second stripped German laws of their citizenship by defining a Reich citizen as a subject of the state who is of German or related blood. In the following years, 13 supplementary laws were passed that further marginalized the Jewish community. The Nuremberg race laws were largely motivated by a Nazi racial ideology that was grounded in scientific racism and theories of eugenics. You see? It was assumed that intermarriage between the superior master race of the Nordic German and the inferior races of the Jews and Gypsies would be detrimental to racial health. Hence, the need for racial hygiene. You see? So what you have here is the Khazars, the Jews and the Gypsies, in other words, came from Khazaria, which is from the Caucasus Mountains. And they painted the perfect human being as being a beautiful Caucasian. And so they wanted to consolidate the white race into the Caucasian. As it turns out, the Nordics still had some fight in them, aka the Nazis. I just made it as simple as I could. For better or for worse, that's what's going on. Because they're saying, they're basically saying, once they realized and started gaining the information of this eugenics movement and started thinking about this, their wheels started turning and said, wait a minute. You guys invented this eugenics thing, so let's do it right in their mind. Not that it was right, but in their mind, they're like, let's do it the way it should be done, or whatever. The answer is none of it should be done. It's all evil bullshit. It does present a good conversation, though, on race and intermixing. That's a very valid conversation that needs to happen. That's a fact. The Human Betterment Foundation, an American eugenics organization established in California in 1928, publishes a 12-page pamphlet entitled Human Sterilization. All right? Strong, intelligent, useful families are becoming smaller and smaller. There can be but one result. The result is race degeneration. Many such pamphlets were published and circulated by the Human Betterment Foundation. Listen to the title of that, Human Betterment Foundation. Eugenics, in an attempt to educate the public and raise awareness about eugenic practices. 1937, Adolf Hitler orders the sterilization of the Rhineland bastard, a derogatory term referencing to the mixed children of German mothers and Africans who served as French colonial troops during the French army occupation of Rhineland. They implemented laws to pursue racial segregation and exclude individuals labeled as racially undesirable, and was one facet of Nazi eugenics. In Mein Kampf, Hitler denounced the mothers of the Rhineland bastards as whores. There are many other children in both German and African heritage resident in Germany who were not Rhineland bastards. Okay? As you can see, he wasn't just trying to get rid of Jews. He was trying to get rid of blacks and everything else. He wanted a racial purity. All right? He wanted racial purity just like the Americans wanted. But again, Americans didn't care when we were sterilizing and doing everything we could to get rid of blacks. They didn't give a fuck about that. They didn't give a fuck about when we were trying to get rid of Native Americans. All of a sudden, it's a problem when Jews get lumped into it. Why is it a problem when that happens? Because they have a lot of pull, much more pull, all right? And that's a fact. So they started raising hell. They started pulling their strings in America to go to war. Because they run and own America. It's not like the blacks who didn't have systematic power and were at the will of this. The Khazars had power, and they weren't going down without a fight, and they won the fight. They won the fight, okay? They rallied their people up for World War II, and they won that fight. Whatever it is, that's history, y'all. That's what really happened. That's what's really going on, all right? 1937, Georgia's General Assembly. First attempt to pass their shit. Georgia's law was modeled after California's. The recommendation of the superintendent of an institution was required for sterilization, and the recommendation that had to be approved by Georgia State Board of Eugenics. Right? Now, interesting again. Georgia's culture placed a strong emphasis on the importance of familial relationships. They believed in the family still. You see, this is all about destroying all the families except for the supreme racist family. You see? Georgia's culture placed a strong emphasis on the importance of familial relationships, and citizens of the state took issue with the government interference with parental rights, except in cases of extreme neglect. This is the sentiment that should be going on. The religious culture also created extended families beyond blood relatives, which offered support to the disadvantaged. Further, as was the case in other Deep South states, Georgia had a relatively small number of urban middle class and uneducated citizens, meaning that progressivism, a political movement that promoted eugenics ideas, did not hold much sway. Whoa. Not only is progressivism synonymous with eugenics, but the South wasn't going for that shit. Now, you could say that religious people are ignorant, but I've seen multiple cases where even though it was ignorance, it ironically protected them. So we should be thankful to these religious people in Georgia that put up a fight against this progressivism, aka eugenicism. Woo, we're going deep today. We're going deep. We're going right in. Told you I wasn't playing with this. Told you I'm not playing with this shit. 1939. The article is a discussion of the first 1,000 of 13,000 sterilizations that were done in the state of California. They went off in California with the sterilization, y'all. You know damn well it was mostly Native Americans. You know damn well. Okay, on to the next one. September 1st, 1939. In 1939, Adolf Hitler authorized a program of euthanasia to kill the incurable, physically or mentally disabled, emotionally distraught, and the elderly. Some eugenics advocates supported the program. All right? So that symbol on the left there is called a fasci. It's a bundle of sticks, right? If you ever notice when our presidents do their speeches from the House, you can clearly see two giant gold fasci on both sides of them, right? This here is a letter to Dr. Gamble. This is from Margaret Sanger, by the way. So who is Gamble? He's the one from the Procter and Gamble fortune, from that family, an elitist, right? So it's good to know that you are recovering. I am also stepping up, and I have felt much better in the past week. Miss Delp was here for Thanksgiving, and I am more delighted to learn that she is able to get $250 from the California Birth Control Organization, plus the $600 from the Federation. That's good. She's a go-getter and a live wire, very tactful and charming as well. I think that my pick of her has been justified, even though she's a little higher priced than the ordinary. She has been working on the article to be written by Miriam DeFord. They were good enough to send me a rough draft for comments and suggestions, and the important suggestion that I made was not to include Miss Delp's actual name in the article because of the fact that her sister is married to one of the high spots in the Farm Security Department, and if the enemy started to work on her name, they might make it difficult along the line. Otherwise, I might think the article is good. As to sending my suggestions for the Federation, I think it is really unfair for me to do so. I am too far away to have the personal contact of the different reactions, and it only holds up any definite project to have the pros and cons battered about, which makes for more chaos and confusion, right? As to my sending suggestions. All right, that's a letter in December 10th, 1939 from Margaret Sanger to C.J. Gamble, showing you that connection, all right? February 1944, Oswald Avery, Colin McLeod, and Macklin Marty published a report in the February issue of the Journal of Experimental Medicine. Results suggest that DNA, not protein, was commonly believed, is the hereditary material for bacteria. Okay, this is just a movement in their science. 48. The United Nations General Assembly adopts the text of the Convention for the Prevention of the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Genocide is an international crime now with the aim of destroying national, and it means with the aims of destroying national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups. Genocide consists of A through E. Which is why, by the way, the UN passed an official resolution saying that Israel, for example, is violating this and that they are committing genocide on the Palestinian people, which is a fact, right? April 1951, The Marching Morons was published by Cyril Kornbluth. At the end of the story, it becomes clear that neither Barlow nor his superior future contacts are truly superior to the morons as reflected by their actions. The idea of a future society overrun by the less intelligent remains a popular one, like in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and the more recent comedy movie, Idiocracy. But you didn't know that Idiocracy was a eugenics movie. Douglas Bevis, a British physician, publishes the article, The Antenatal Prediction of Hemolytic Disease of the Newborn. Details his findings on how amniocentesis can be used to test for Rh factor and incapabilities between a mother and her fetus. Such incapabilities cause complications to the fetus and extend to the newborn. As of the 2010s, it is used in early pregnancy to diagnose chromosomal conditions such as Down syndrome. Amniocentesis has been used to inform the practice of selective abortion. Because of this, it has ties to new methods of eugenic practices which suggest that certain fetuses are undesirable. That science was invented in 1952. And check this out. When I was in Kaiser and getting ready to have my baby with my girlfriend, right? Not only did the head, whatever her name was, the head RN or head whatever that sits down with you with the so-called parenting meeting, which I'm about to show you has its foundation in eugenics. They sat down for the so-called family planning meeting, and not only did she jump up and do like a drive-by flu shot on my pregnant girlfriend, which I was livid about, she gave me this piece of paper showing the percentages. If I run a test, if I do this, the test for this amniocentesis, whatever shit, if I do this test, I can see if my child's going to have Down syndrome so that I can abort it. Now, she handed this piece of paper to me with this chart. I explained to her I wasn't interested. She suggested it again. I explained she wasn't interested. She pushed it again. I explained I wasn't interested. She said, I just try to like keep it in your mind. And da, 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 da. Now, my girlfriend disagrees with me on this series of events. To me, it was clear as day because at the time, I know about the history of vaccines and eugenics. I've been studying different topics like this since I was 14 years old. So I was seeing in a different perspective when all that was going on. Okay, so it was clear as day that they were pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to do this process so that I can abort a potentially Down syndrome baby. Eugenics live in effect. Right here, I experienced it myself. I don't know what your experience is, but I personally encountered the eugenics movement. That's all I'm going to say about that now. 1959, Jerome Lejeune was a French human geneticist who worked with Dr. Raymond Turpin at the Hospital St. Louis in Paris. He believed that Down syndrome must be involved in some sort of genetic change. By 1954, he began to suspect that individuals living with Down syndrome must lack a chromosome. He prepared karyotypes and examined them through a microscope. He photographed the karyotypes, expecting them to show the absence of chromosome. Instead, they showed that Down syndrome patients had 47 chromosomes rather than 46, an extra chromosome. Prenatal testing generally screens for genetic abnormalities, including Down syndrome, which may lead to aborted fetuses. Okay? Like I said, they definitely put me through that ringer. Definitely promoted it. She almost didn't take no for an answer, by the way. I'm telling you that straight up. Large numbers of First Nation and Métis children in Canada were taken or scooped from their homes and communities without consent or knowledge of their families or bands and given out to mainly non-Aboriginal families in Canada and internationally. Right? Called the 60 scoop, swooping. Francis Crick, 1962. James Watson, and Maurice Wilkins received the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine for their work on creating the double helix model of DNA. DNA is the substance which is the carrier of heredity in higher organisms. Now, I have a point to make right here. This whole DNA science is founded in eugenics, so we have to question it. We have to question how valid it is. Remember, I just showed you a long history of them using pseudoscience to back up a movement that they already want. Now, they already wanted there to be DNA before there was DNA. They already wanted some sort of incontrovertible black and white proof that things are carried hereditary, that heredity is a real thing, okay? So they've been trying to promote this for decades before they ever even discovered it. So when you have what I would assert as religious psychopaths trying to bring their prophecies into fruition, we have to question science under those dynamics. We've got to question it. We've got to. Now with that, I'm going to conclude this section, right? I'm going to conclude this section of part 6, and then we're going to conclude this entire eugenics agenda presentation with my very next video, which will be part 7, okay? That's it for this one. When we come back, we'll pick up on this Dune, all right? Which is what influenced Star Wars and all kinds of other stuff, okay? Thank you, guys. I'll meet you back for part 7, the final part.